my guest on today's episode is Colby Williams. He is the author of a really cool book called Small Town, Big Money, which is all about nurturing entrepreneurship in small towns and how small towns are actually the best place to start a small business. I recently just finished up his book, and today he joins me to chat about kind of two things. Again, why he believes small towns are a great place for people to start businesses, and secondly, how as a small town or as a community, how can we think differently about how we might position ourselves to be a place that attracts entrepreneurs. Super cool stuff that we talk about. He is from a small town in Missouri, and he started a really cool coffee company right there in his small town called Parengo Coffee. So he shares all about that journey and gives us some really valuable things to think about. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this chat with my new friend, Colby Williams. All right. So Colby,
hey.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be talking to you. So over the weekend, I just finished your book. And so so you and I were just talking a little bit before we hit record here. And what I'm so excited to talk with you about today is what small towns can really do to attract entrepreneurs into their communities. And what I love about this topic is because of the project I'm working on, which I shared a little bit with you about. But I also really, in my heart of hearts, believe that for small communities, like landing the big fish of like the big industry, whether it's manufacturing, I just feel like that is such a long shot for so many of our rural communities. And it really comes down to how do we nurture and find and attract people that might want to start their own business and do it like it's a smaller business, but it's really important to the economic vitality of small towns. So with that, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you live, all about your book. Tell us all the things, Colby.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. And I live in Southeast Missouri. My business is called Parengo Coffee. It's a coffee shop, formerly a roaster. And we're in a really small town called Sikeston, Missouri. We opened in 2013 in the summer. And I say we as it was founded by my parents and I. My parents are from this area. I didn't really grow up here, but they lived back in this area, and they're like a really cute couple, and they still like take walks at night and hold hands around the neighborhood and stuff like that. They were hitting this point where they wanted like a second or third act, and they were looking at opening up a cafe or a restaurant or something, but they had never worked in that environment before. And I have about a little over a decade now, maybe in like coffee and food and related types of jobs. And so I was kind of like, you should maybe not do that. You should really think about that before you jump into it, because it's a different kind of business. But we looked around their town, and there's a revitalization going on in the downtown area, and a lot of good, there's like a history of entrepreneurship in this town. A lot of really cool companies that people have heard of regionally were founded here. And so we started to look around, and we kind of got the drift that there were like quite a few property owners and city leaders willing to work with entrepreneurs. And also that there was not a specialty coffee company within 150 miles in any direction.
Yeah.
There are like two major thoroughfares that intersect here in Sikeston, Missouri. And so lots of travelers coming through, heading to Branson or going to Nashville or New Orleans, going up to Chicago or St. Louis, and nowhere to stop for coffee except like a truck stop and a gas station and a McDonald's, So
right.
I thought that maybe we developed a plan, and if I roasted and established like a wholesale supplier network, we could also do a really good coffee shop atmosphere, and we'd be the only option. So maybe we'd get all that interstate traffic. We could see if there was a local market, and then we could even like go out and start selling it to other restaurants and things on our own. So long story short, it's 6 years later. We did all that. We actually grew the wholesale network to the point where we were able to sell it to someone else last fall. And
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, they were excited to pick it up. So they bought that from us. They're another local coffee company that has opened within the last 3 years. They've got aggressive plans for expansion, and so that was right for them to buy that while I could train them and pass it on to them. And we're down to just having a shop again.
Are you in your shop, by the way?
I am in the shop right now. That's probably what you can hear in the background.
Yeah, which is okay. I just think it's actually I think people will be much more patient with the background like noise if they know you're in your own coffee shop. So that's very, very, very cool. Also, what's the population of Sikeston?
Sikeston's got 17,000 people.
Okay.
The closest larger town is called Cape Girardeau. It's really our area's only like college town, if you could define it as a college town. And it's about 35,000 people. So that's even like the largest town in our region is still only that big.
From how big of a radius?
You have to go probably another like 70 miles or so north of Cape to get a town the same size as Cape, and even an hour to an hour and a half in any other direction from Sikeston, you're still only hitting towns like 50,000 or smaller.
Right.
Yeah. So
right. That's
pretty large.
And that's pretty rural then.
Yeah.
I mean, truly. Yeah. And I mean, we're in North Dakota where, I mean, 17,000 is a mid-ish size city, or community. So our towns are very, very small, but that still is, you're far from a metro, what would be considered a metro area. Right. Okay. So, and by the way, your book is a really good read for anybody. We'll post the link to it. I read it on Kindle. Otherwise I'd be holding it. Like, this was such a good one.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you.
I think that there are so many takeaways for anybody that's interested in starting their own business. You clearly have put in time and effort. You matured a business to the point that you could sell it, which is fantastic. So now you're being kind of sought out from conference organizers and event planners, right? Like we were just talking about, you have this opportunity to speak to this topic of what small towns, or if you're big enough and you've got multiple neighborhoods, right? What are these neighborhoods doing, or what are communities doing, or what can we do to be entrepreneur friendly? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I jumped on our historic downtown Sikeston revitalization organization. I jumped in that board really early on after we opened up our coffee shop in our downtown here.
Yep.
Because I just thought that if I can work on a neighborhood to bring more latte drinking people within 9 square blocks around my front door, then I'm helping my business. And so it's like a sideways way of directly helping my own business. Like I can use the organization's marketing money to better my town and create more jobs and all that, but that also directly benefits my company.
Right.
So I think like I jumped on that early, and I've seen this change of like, early on, we all kind of thought like, why isn't everybody participating? Why wouldn't everybody see this like we see it? And then we kind of realized as an organization, like I was an early adopter as a business owner who saw the value of the organization, but other people may not see that, or may feel like the organization needs to do more to get them. And so we started thinking entrepreneurially about not just our own businesses, but about our neighborhood as a whole. So branding the neighborhood, all that stuff, those are all things that we dealt with to get other entrepreneurs to come do business with us in our neighborhood and to work together like as a group.
Right.
And then like the city followed suit. So they look for the big fish, like you said in the intro. Like classically, the economic development director is looking at the next huge factory to get to the town, to bring 10,000 jobs and to grow it like gangbusters and build all the new houses and stuff. Whereas we're looking at like one employer who might have 5 employees at a time.
Right.
But if we can eventually have 100 of those and have all the employees and customers living upstairs on our second story, and developing like one little plot of land at a time.
Yep.
Then eventually, we might provide the same number of jobs, but I think the economic impact is that much greater for a small community. And I don't have like the studies to prove that, but some things I heard recently, just little things like that stack up. Just like if 5 people work in my shop, but 5 people also live on the second floor because I put in apartments in my building,
yep.
Each one of those people is expected to spend around $20,000 a year within walking distance of their apartment. So that directly benefits all the businesses. So it just like cycles back again and again. And when you have a large employer and you build an entire new subdivision to house those new employees, yes, the numbers in your town are going up and the general tax basis might be going up, but they're not necessarily spending that money back in your downtown. And so what you see is like you've seen in every American town, you saw a downtown that was huge in 1950, and then it moved to a strip mall, and then it moved to a real mall, and now it's coming back again. You get like businesses moving and not necessarily like growing.
Right. Well, and I think that's such an important trend to pay attention to, because more than likely a large manufacturer is going to be some franchise model or something along that lines, right? So they have non-local ownership generally, which means then too that even just the revenue generated from that business itself isn't coming back into the community as at high of a level as your small individual or independently owned businesses are.
Right.
So
people in the community are making money,
right.
but that company is generating wealth for somebody at HQ somewhere else away.
Right. So let's talk for a second about the branding piece, because I'll tell you, there's a lot of things I highlighted on my Kindle in your book. So by the way, your book is called Small Town Big Money. Yes? Small
Town Big Money. Yep. Subtitle is Entrepreneurship and Opportunity in Today's Small Town.
It's
what we're trying to do here.
It's awesome. And so one of the things that you talked about being a part of, which I would love if you'd share a little bit more, because it was something that right away I went, ooh, how can I grab onto that idea and make that work here? Was the idea of almost a newsletter. I think you called it a newsletter. It was like a highly edited editorial magazine, right? Where you basically were selling the vision of what you wanted downtown Sikeston to be, not necessarily what it was. And you started to slowly change the perceptions of how people viewed Sikeston as a community. So how did that all come about? Who collaborated on it? Just tell us everything about that, because I thought that was a really cool way to do a rebranding effort and make it, community driven, basically.
Yeah, I found out pretty early that we just had like a branding nightmare. Like there were a lot of well-intentioned, highly motivated baby boomer era people who were involved in the early stages of our neighborhood's revitalization process. And they don't, that generation doesn't see branding and some of these issues the same way that a younger generation would, but they wanted to. Like they thought that our town needs to get some of these young professionals back involved in the downtown.
Right.
But their material, when the ask or the advertisements or the events or whatever, were really branded for an older audience. And so one of our efforts early.
Could you give me an example? Can you think of something? Or even if you can give an example of a story that was being told about what Sikeston was that you knew as a younger generation wasn't going to be a torch to carry forward. I mean, even if you could give a couple of kind of material examples of what either of those things look like, I think that'd be helpful. Because I know I can think of examples in my community. And it's also, I'm guessing, did you grow up in Sikeston? Is that
I didn't really. I've kind of moved to a new town every 4 to 6 years my entire life.
Okay.
But I have lived here a couple of times now.
Did your parents have?
Yeah, most of my family is from here, and I have like 6 nieces and nephews who are in or have recently been in a high school here, and so I have family ties. And one of the things I noticed having not grown up here was that immediately when I moved here, one of the first lines that came up in a meeting. Can you hear this blender?
I can't now. It just cut out.
Okay. Good.
We're good.
We have very delicious frappes if you're in the area. Okay. Well, one of the first lines that came up in a meeting I was attending, talking about branding, I think we were talking about some new like roadside signs as you enter our town, and somebody wanted to put a cotton bowl because this is the northernmost point where you can grow cotton, and that our agricultural history is very important to people who are from here. And also the line where Southern hospitality begins. That had been the tagline of our town for the longest time, because the idea was that as people are coming down from the north to eat at our famous Lambert's Cafe or passing through here to go to Branson or anywhere else in the South, we want them to know they're entering the South and and like an agricultural heavy area. And that's all really cool. And that has generated lots of prosperity for people in our region. And it's something to hold on to, its heritage. However, I'm not from here, and none of that made me want to, stop watching Netflix and go to a carnival in my town. You know what I mean? So I was just trying to express like, that all is neat, but I don't think that says what we want, because if we're hosting things, like we have this amazing wine festival in my neighborhood that was the event I attended for the first time that really turned me around and made me think like I could have a coffee shop here. This is definitely going to work. This neighborhood's cool. These people like want new stuff. And I think this is really going to work. But the line where Southern hospitality begins, the image of a cotton bowl, didn't make me think like I want to put on my suit jacket and go sip some wine and listen to some jazz music in the street. You know what I mean? So I just thought we had like too many things. We were just throwing it all out there and hoping people got it. And so I suggested some other things. And one of the first things we did was like, let's not throw away our like historic part of downtown Sikeston, but let me have another avenue where I can play up the downtown part, which without the word historic on it. I know this may be just semantics to a lot of people, but
no, it's not. This is why I'm asking. This is exactly why I'm asking. So yeah, go ahead.
So I got two of my best friends in the world who I just met after my coffee shop opened. I had never known them before. We're all around the same age. We're like all in our early 30s now. At the time we were in our 20s. One of them walked into my shop. She was wearing roller skates and like a roller derby outfit. She had her lip pierced and like a mohawk. She's on her way to her roller derby game. And I said, this girl, is on the fringe of the demographics in this town.
Definitely.
And I think we're going to be friends. And so I asked her, I was like, what do you do? Are you an artist or something? She said, I'm a graphic designer and I'm pretty much the best. And I was like, okay, you're going to work for my company. And so she works for another company full time, but she does almost all the graphic designs for Parengo Coffee. And almost everything else I've done since then. Like she's the artist behind it. She has a friend named Mallory who's a photographer, and she's the best in town. And so I immediately met with both of them and said, I want to put out a magazine. And some of my other friends like wrote for it and everything else. But these two artists, like I had to have them. Like they're the main part of the magazine. It has to look, every single page needs to look like an Instagram account, basically, or like a Pinterest pin. We did it in tabloid format or like square, and it's going to be quarterly. And so it's something special. It's going to be full color, no border, just wall to wall, like hit you, like you're going to see it and be like, whoa, what is that? I need to pick one of those up. And we're going to make it completely free. And so the organization Downtown Sikeston put it out, but we branded it as something completely different. And we didn't use the word historic anywhere in the pages. We just made it like really young, fresh, and bright. We did a fashion issue. We did a downtown living issue where we profiled some apartments down here that are really cool. We always had an article written by a new entrepreneur to the neighborhood. We had one written by the downtown director who could have he's been here for 75 years. So he has like a historic perspective, but he can talk about the progress, from that type of perspective.
Right.
So we covered all the buzzwords like progress, innovation, and entrepreneurship, and loft apartments. Just all the things people are looking for, or all the things we wondered if people were looking for in a neighborhood like ours. And we found out that they were, because everybody in the world talked about this magazine. And people would drive in from surrounding communities, even the larger one that's 30 miles away, asking if we had any copies still because they heard about this magazine, but they couldn't find it. And we accidentally, just because we couldn't afford to print too many copies, we accidentally created scarcity of this really cool thing. And so people couldn't find it and were looking for it and thought that they had missed out on something. And so it ended up being pretty awesome. I really liked it. And it was all because we had a graphic designer in town and a photographer in town, and almost no one was using them. And they belonged in our neighborhood. I mean, even though they don't live in our neighborhood, but they should be volunteering. Our neighborhood should tap into that, because they're putting out the perfect image for what we were really going for and the type of people we wanted to attract down here. We realized in putting that magazine out that we have quite a few businesses, from a coffee shop to a really cool like a wine bar, steakhouse thing to like some high-end jewelry and boutique stores down here that like the people who shop in the high-end jewelry store also shop at the high-end furniture store, also drink lattes, and they want to eat the expensive steak, and so we share customers. But we weren't reaching them with our more like historic Southern roots type of message. So we called our magazine Brink, the Downtown Sikeston magazine. We put it online as if it was like an independent magazine company. It has its own Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff. And I think we successfully reached that demographic, and they got to see all the awesome stuff that was downtown as if it was just organically being written about in a magazine, even though our organization was the one putting it out.
Right. Okay. So I love that. I love the whole concept. And I love the idea that you were tapping into resources of people that were already there, which I think is a really important thing for any small town. So let's talk for a second about how an even smaller town that maybe doesn't have like neighborhoods, like my community is 1 square mile. I mean, it's like 1 square mile. So the neighborhood, I mean, granted, there's like housing developments that you kind of refer to that, but I mean, overall, we're one big community, right? So what advice or direction or thoughts would you have for a community that's a little bit smaller and maybe doesn't have specifically a downtown? What I will say is I love the fact that you picked up on history matters, right? And everything that we have is because somebody else came before us, right? They laid the path for us. So being able to somehow bridge that gap. That was why I asked if you were from Sikeston, because I think I'm coming back to my hometown. I've been back for 11 years now, but it's that constant, it's not tension because that makes it negative, but trying to look forward and move forward without stepping all over everything that's been done, that's positive. That can be a delicate balance, I think, to hold for those of us that want to push the envelope for a community, right? So what ideas or thoughts would you have about how to do what you guys did, but on a smaller scale? What could that look like for a smaller community, do you think?
I don't think there's like one way to brand a town or a neighborhood that is the right way. And I think that every town has to figure out what's unique about it or what is included in its story in the past that it would like to highlight moving forward.
Right.
For example, this is not the only thing unique about Sikeston, but some of us have identified and we believe that entrepreneurship and fostering small business and like the next wave of entrepreneurs that are going to take small businesses from Sikeston to the region or the world, we think that that is key to economic growth in our town. And so when we look back in our history, it's not like a totally change. We're not saying like, let's erase that and start with entrepreneurship. When we look back, we have some amazing success stories of entrepreneurs, and we just don't tell their stories. That's what we need to do is we need to tap into that, highlight them, ask them to mentor the next generation to come, and then brand ourselves as like the town of entrepreneurship. Because I think that's our thing. That's the unique story that we can tell. But other towns have different things. There's this great town in Ohio that has these like really cool caves, and the whole town decided like, that's our thing. We are this weird cave town. And they have gift shops devoted to just cave stuff. Like you can get your cave t-shirts and your hats and your whatever.
Right.
And that's their thing. They do cave tours. They do like haunted cave things. They do like concerts in the cave and, all this stuff. And they've branded themselves in that way. That has nothing to do with like a gentrified luxury product boutique store, even though those probably exist there. It has nothing to do with entrepreneurship necessarily, even though it takes entrepreneurial thinking to get there. But it's centered around that brand of this is the cool cave tourism town. And so whatever the town has, if it's a town where there's lots of agricultural genetic research done, like really play up that, I would look at really playing up that scientific thing, and even to the point of investing in your science program in your schools. Like make that the thing your town is known for, is we turn out some of the world's greatest geneticists 20 years from now, because we doubled down on that one thing that our town does the best.
Right.
So you find whatever that is your town does the best, is known for, if it makes sense for being known for that or doing that the best moving forward, and through the lens of, growth and vitality, even if it's not population growth, but you want to be healthy. If you can continue to be known for that thing and really be proud of that thing and figure out ways to brand yourself for that thing, then I think every town probably can figure out what their thing is.
Right. What I love that you just said that I think is a really important distinction, and I feel this way too. Growth to me is it's not just about population growth. I mean, that, of course, because I think for a lot of small towns, if we cannot shrink, then we're doing okay, right? But I want us to be growing our capacity. There's untapped potential in every small town, because there's not always enough things for people to feel like they really belong to. So they maybe, like, for whatever reason, I think a lot of times this happens for trailing spouses, where somebody gets a job here, or they come back to a family business, or we've got a really good school, we've got a really great hospital. They come and there's this trailer, this spouse that comes along behind, and they never find their way in the community, right? So that's something that I think a lot about, is how do we create more avenues for people to get involved with stuff, because people show up differently when they feel like they belong, that sense of belonging. And it sounds like that's kind of what you did too, is you gave a very visual way for people to say, do you connect with this or not? You knew exactly who you were trying to connect to and trying to reach with that magazine.
Yeah, and we kind of laid the groundwork, I think, or at least it set us up to wonder if there was this magazine's audience in our town, because my shop had an open mic night, and there just hadn't been one like that, where it wasn't at a bar and it was a regular monthly thing. And coffee shops are kind of like a safe atmosphere for all types of people, and we were packed, and it was like, what I consider myself like kind of a nerdy fringe type of person who, like, they wanted to come in here and talk about NPR podcasts, or they wanted to, they just had like too many piercings to like fit in, at the other place in town or whatever. And I realized, like, whoa, there's like dozens of people who don't feel like they belong anywhere, and they can fit in at a coffee shop's open mic night. So they probably would love to know about these other businesses who are run by people just like them, but for some reason they've never met or whatever. Right. They just have like an idea that they don't fit together in whatever the majority of the town is like. And I didn't believe that was actually the case, because we have enough people who consider themselves fringe and enough people who consider themselves mainstream, and they all come in here and have coffee in my shop and attend our events. They're all at Wine Festival. They're all at the rodeo in August. Like, everybody's really a part of the town. And it's just like people didn't see themselves fitting the brand that we were putting out there, I guess. And so once we all got a little bit more on message, people started to identify with that thing, and it gives you pride to be a part of it. And it's funny going to meetings now. We just had a meeting the other day with some Missouri Main Street people. It's an organization, part of the National Main Street thing. They came to our town to help us realize the potential in some of our really old buildings down here. And we have, those meetings used to have 5 people in them, and there were 50 maybe now. Like, people are showing up, and the whole city council's there, the mayor's there, like, everybody we've always wanted to be involved is at every one of these things now. And a cool thing I was thinking about when you were just talking about growth and health and of a town, like, I don't think, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that everybody has identified with always, but a town can also see opportunity, and everybody can get on board, like they're all entrepreneurs in a startup together, but they're treating their town that way. And I think that cohesion will attract other entrepreneurs, even if they don't live there yet. Like, they will see that, they'll see the opportunity you've created, they'll want to jump on that. And like, for example, an idea that I floated one time, I don't know if this will ever happen, I just think towns should think like this and throw this around. We have a big power plant here that our city owns. You read articles a lot that suggest that traditional power plants might go the way of the buffalo pretty soon as new energies are coming about. Now, whatever side of the political line you fall on when it comes to energy and climate change and all that stuff, at the time that I pitched this to some of our leaders, it got a little bit partisan, but then we talked it through and we came around to like, it doesn't matter if you believe one thing is happening or not. The trend is that there's money to be made probably in solar and wind and alternative technologies and
Right.
even conversion and energy storage and all these big things. What if our power plant led the way doing that in our region, which is traditionally the last to adopt new technologies? What our region is impoverished and undereducated, underserved. We're not as connected to a lot of the new technologies that come out. So what if we're the very first? What if we get on first just to create economic opportunity for entrepreneurs? And so we kind of throw out a lot of ideas, and we're looking into what the possibilities are in a town that, like, even if we didn't have something like entrepreneurship or like a downtown, if we couldn't figure out our thing, maybe creating that new thing is our thing. You know, like we could be
Right.
the future of power in Missouri. We could brand ourselves that way, and that would be an exciting town to sign up for. You know,
Right.
whether you believe in all that's attached to that or not, you can make money in those
Right.
technologies.
Right. Well, I think what you're suggesting, and I think is really important for communities to think about. Well, there's two things. You reminded me, I when I first moved back here, I remember thinking to myself, like, if we would just think about ourselves as one giant company, and you said thinking of yourselves as a startup, and you think about attraction and recruitment and retention of people, and then you start thinking about not employee engagement, but resident engagement. Like what do all of those things look like? If in talent management and, actually nurturing people and finding the best in people, because that's what you do with employees in a company, right? So I think I think there's a lot of value in that discussion. It's just the hardest part about it is getting everybody to the table to share that idea. That's, I think, one of the biggest challenges, is getting alignment around that vision. But you're also suggesting that we get to decide what we want to be and then talk about it as if it is. And there's a lot of power in that, instead of talking about like one day we'll be, leading the way in power. If you decide today, or there's enough of you that are in positions of either influence or are volunteering their time to this initiative, if enough of you get around that messaging, then you get to become that.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I often feel like our systems are very entrenched. And so sometimes change comes slowly and things take time. But this is something that every single one of us could do. And I think even if we get right down to just individual business owners, if you feel like you need a rebrand or a refresh on who you are, what you're putting out into the world, you just get to decide. It really, and I like your guy, what's his name? Steve? I think Steve, the jewelry owner that shuts down every 3 years, right? Shuts his doors and completely refreshes his building. Yeah. And you've flat out said, like, that's not going to be everybody's thing, but it's become his thing. And so he gets to kind of renew himself every 3 years. And I think sometimes we have to realize that there are things that we can do, and a lot of it just is what we think about. Who do we want to be? And then if you start saying this is who we are, then eventually people see you that way. It's self-fulfilling prophecy, right? But in a positive spin.
Yeah, and entrepreneurs, if you read, all the millions of words that are released every single day online about entrepreneurial stuff and startup culture, and it's hard to keep up. But there are a zillion articles about, branding your company and think about like why you're in business, who you're in business for, what you do, and all that stuff. And I think that towns are doing this, and the ones that aren't have to start thinking in this way. You have to, like you said, think about your town entrepreneurially. Right now, I think it's no coincidence that our town feels energetic and like it's gonna happen here. It really does feel like it's working, whatever that thing is. But it's no coincidence that a lot of people that come to mind when I think of our city council are entrepreneurs. They actually do still run their business in town. Our
Right.
mayor has grown a company. He's got a family company. He's grown from, it started here in a garage in our town, and now it's really big and regional. And they think that way, you know, like they all grew up in, whether they're in family businesses or they started one from scratch.
Right.
They think like entrepreneurs. And so now that this is the flavor of the day, they get it. Like if you say that to them for the first time in a city council meeting, they're like, oh yeah, we should be thinking like that. That's why we are successful. We need to apply that to our town. And I think that's exciting to see small towns get on that. Now, this may be a transition, so cut me off
That's okay.
if you think that we haven't covered it all. But the exciting part of that is that I really believe that small towns are a great place to do business. So as they are getting themselves healthier to the point of being attractive to entrepreneurs, I really think entrepreneurs have to start considering small towns as an alternative to the classic startup centers of our country. You know, like you can move to San Francisco and go through Series A and B or whatever funding and raise $17 million and then spend $16 million on that building and all that equipment and your employees and all that stuff. Or you could probably start the same business here for like $15 in the spare bedroom of your parents' house, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
So as towns are like becoming attractive and trying to attract entrepreneurs, we have to start paying attention. And like your overhead is so much lower. And at the same time, the town is so much hungrier to get you.
Right.
That I think that's going to be really exciting to see how towns shape themselves around entrepreneurs, but also how entrepreneurs migrate to small towns that are the most attractive.
Right. So, okay. So a couple things. On that note, what do you think specifically are some tactics for small towns to say, hey, entrepreneurs, come and open up your shops here? Like, is it funding? Is it economic policies, you know, practices? If it's grant funding, like what are some interesting things that you've seen that really make for an entrepreneurial environment? I mean, we've talked about pieces of it. Some of it is just deciding that you are, but ultimately we're all fighting. Like, so we're the one of the bigger small towns. Like, again, we're a very small town. We have like 1,800 people. I mean, we're a small town, but then around us are way smaller towns, right? And we're kind of a hub in Southeast North Dakota. So we're fighting our neighbors, these neighboring communities. If people want the pace of life that comes with living in a very small town, we're fighting all of those communities for that talent, right? Or for, so what are some material things that people can do or should be thinking about potentially to make it?
I think it depends on
a no-brainer.
I think it depends on what your town has and what it wants. There's a town I know of nearby, Paducah, Kentucky, and they had a lot of what could have been historic homes that had fallen into disrepair. And the city ended up owning a lot of them. And so they decided that's what they had, and then they wanted a vibrant arts community. And,
you referenced this in your book.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And so, so like houses were available for $1 or, you know, almost nothing if you put so much money into getting the house structurally sound or at least up to code where you could live there and work there. And if you use so much square footage for the arts in some fashion, whether it's a gallery or a studio or whatever.
Yep.
And so artists flocked there. They could afford to own a home, and they could do their art there and everything. Now, that might have required, like a lot of people, the city had to like lose potential value in those properties. But they were looking long term, like what are we going to get over the next few decades from allowing artists to do this here? And some people probably didn't believe in it. Some people had like a good vision for it. But the city probably also had to rezone some of those neighborhoods to allow for commercial and residential space to be shared in a long time residential area. So a lot of things had to happen to make that all work. But Paducah now, I mean, there's like really awesome stuff going on over there. And there are businesses that have opened that feed that artist community that don't necessarily have anything to do with the arts, but
Yeah.
because there are all these artists there, and now like a lot of that first wave, they are middle-aged, and you have people who've come behind them to either learn from them or because it was an artist-friendly town. So you have like several generations, 2 or 3 generations worth of artists who are working and who own property and own studio space and show their art constantly. And so you have like 2 or 3 awesome hip coffee shops who feed that demographic, and you have like this new brewery that artists love and they get to hang their work in there. And a Mellow Mushroom just came to this new development over there, which is like, you know, a really eclectic artist type pizza joint. And so you have like all these other things. Entrepreneurs see that as opportunity and jump on that. Even if the artist isn't an entrepreneur, they bring it along with them.
Right.
And so that's what they had and what they wanted, and that's how it's played out for them. Now that's not for every town. If your town, like puts in the infrastructure to have the region's fastest fiber internet, and it's free or something like that, you know, provided by the city, we're going to blanket this in Wi-Fi. Come put your internet-based businesses in our town, and you can connect from anywhere. Now that's attractive. If I'm looking at anything within 500 miles of your town, and that's going to cost me a lot to get established somewhere, I need to buy server space or whatever. You know, there are companies that install servers made for, you know, data or e-currency like Bitcoin storage, and they build it knowing that the users will come, and then they advertise, I've got the stuff, come, you know, pay me to store your stuff for you, your data. And you could do that. Like a town could have very great infrastructure, including server space, come host your internet-based company here. And that's attractive. If you could do that there for pennies on the dollar, that you could do it in like a tech hub like Silicon Valley or Salt Lake or Boston or New Orleans, then you're definitely going to consider it, because you have to save wherever you can in your startup budget. Yep. So I think like little things like that, like even if you don't have it now, you could install it, you could spend the money, a city could spend the money on it and say, this is what we have, we know what we want. We want tech-based companies to start here, and then start advertising and recruit and get them in. You could also say like, my town has quite a few restaurants. Like this area is just, we looked at a study, and we also have lots of smaller towns in our region, and they will drive here to shop retail in brick and mortar stores and to eat. And so we have tons of awesome restaurants. We have tons of fast food. We have tons of chains, and we have tons of just locally grown big restaurants that have been here forever, because people drive to my town to eat from all over the area. And so that's something we have. We have like an element of expertise, and we have a demand for food here. So what if we install, like if we were going to put in a business incubator to attract new talent, maybe it's food based. Maybe we install like test kitchens, and we have events centered around tasting new, pop-up restaurant products or something like that. Like that would be a really good on-brand fit for my community.
Right.
And so that's not something we're doing right now, but just off the top of my head, that's like what we have. And maybe we should tap into that if we want to really feed the demand in our region for food options and things like that. Then that's what we have, and that's what we are saying we want. So that's something we could build here and then advertise like this is the place to start a restaurant, or to earn your chops cooking on a line in one of our established places, and something like that.
Right. So one of the other things you said earlier that I think is really important is for communities to think about, who are you trying to attract? Mm-hmm. So there's a huge difference between attracting tourists versus new residents. I think a huge opportunity for us, and I would love if you'd speak to this. I don't know that you directly spoke to this in your book, but the idea of getting your youth to return. Mm-hmm. Did you speak to that in the book? I'm not sure that like overtly you did, but I just think that again is something where I had almost like a walk of shame coming back home. Mm-hmm. And we have got to take control of that narrative and change it if we really want to say, of course we're not a college town. So our graduates have to leave if they want to further their education, right? Which is totally understandable. So I just want us to have some way to come back and say, oh, but what about once you go and you get that degree or you get some experience? I just don't think there's enough of a obvious, overt statement that you could have a successful life here.
Yeah.
So partnership with a school is something that I see for us. Have you seen that work really well for any other communities?
The first thing that comes to mind, and this is maybe not a great answer, but this is a problem everywhere, like in a lot of places. I mean, in the town where I grew up, almost no one I know still lives very close to there. Mm-hmm. And like I remember when like you knew somebody a few years ahead of you in high school and they graduated and they were like still around working at that restaurant or whatever, there was like a scarlet letter on them or something, like they must not have any ambition or whatever. And that is too bad because, you know, as a kid, that's an easy opinion to have. And now looking back as someone trying to develop a community, I'm like, oh man, I wish I had some of those people around who were like hungry and loved their town and could jump on these committees and stuff with me and help out.
Yeah, right.
So I don't really know the answer, but I have heard lately a lot of talk about this problem as it relates to like Africa or some third world areas. Like the best and the brightest get these scholarships to go 1,000,000 miles away and go to med school or whatever, and then they rack up debt, they maybe get married, start a family and all that, and the motivation to go back to a place where you can make a huge difference, but where your family's never lived before and where you never have any hope of paying off the debt you've accrued.
Right.
That's a hard step to take, you know, and then after you've spent decades somewhere in a new town raising kids and everything, like you're not going to go back and to the town that sent you in the first place and who probably needs you the most. So how do you motivate people to return to places they're needed? And I don't know the answer to that. We do. It seems like there are like a few things you can do here that are like acceptable, and then like everything else is not, or something. And I don't know why that's the case. If you move here to start, if you come back after college to this town and you're a teacher or you start a business or work at a bank, then it's like, okay, like you're doing it the right way or something. So I don't know, maybe we try to figure out how to pair, if entrepreneurship is like the thrust, like in my town, like we're trying to get that to be the thing we do here really well, is develop new entrepreneurs. Maybe you pair the people who have an easier path to return, like those whose families are landowners, who are expected to come take over the farm, but they also have some inherited wealth attached, so it's easy for them to do that.
Right.
Or those who they move back into an established position at a business or at a bank or something like that. If we can pair those people as like a really good welcome home mat or a net to the people who are taking more of a risk, like whether it's socially or financially, and just returning to the town where you were raised in order to take a huge risk and start a new business and pursue this new idea and grow it from nothing into something. If the people who have a little bit of easier time returning can pass on some of that ease to the people who are taking a harder step, maybe,
right,
and that could soften the blow. And I don't know how to make that happen. I did not attend high school here, so I feel like I'm the wrong person to make it happen in this town. But I could see, you know, we have quite a few people who've returned to some family establishment who are also very involved in our community and doing really good things. And they've taken on like a young leadership role, which is cool to see because that didn't happen for quite a few decades.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe they're going to be the key to, like, I guess, like, make it cool for everybody else to come back here and make stuff happen. So maybe it just takes a few people to do it first. Right.
And I feel like it's a lot of the language of not apologizing. Because when young people return to our small town, like we had a community development director that just came back, and she's in her 20s, you know, and she comes back here. And when we first hired her, and I'm on the chamber and our economic development group, so I was part of the team that hired her. there were a handful of people that said to me, why would you want to come back here? And that's that, like, again, as a person that wants our community to be great, I just cringe and I look at them and I think, you don't get to speak for our community anymore. I just want to say, like, don't talk. If anybody asks you what you think, just don't say anything. Cause that's something that I think we're not aware of. We need to be more aware of how we talk about our own community. If somebody drives through and they stop at a gas station and the attendant says, yeah, there's nothing to do here. And we're not even telling a good version of the story of our own town, right? So it's all these little ways add up to what our community is perceived to be, I think. So these are the things that I think about a lot. Of course, there's no easy answer, but it all wraps into the attraction or lack thereof of your community.
Yeah, two of the things that were like the two mantras we held when we had that magazine Brink. We talked about this a lot anytime we would have like little staff meetings or whatever. It was that our town could be whatever we want it to be. So whatever we put on these pages is the image we're putting out there. This is what we want. And we're showing you that it can be or is already this. And that because that's the way it's always been done is not a good enough reason anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that applies when you have some of those people still on the boards or whatever. They started out with really great intentions and hope and ambition and everything. And they've kind of got into that slump where they are the first to say why this all won't work. Is that attitude that they have because it's the way it's always been done or whatever is not good enough for us anymore. And that they, their time has come to step off for a while and to watch and see us make the change we're saying can happen. The other thing that you just reminded me of that I think is a really great idea. We haven't figured out exactly who's equipped to do this in our town yet, but something we've been a few of us came up with this idea a few years ago. We've been trying to push someone to develop is when people come to our town, like I said, they come here for retail, for a few large events, and for to eat. And so we have all these entrepreneurs and these city leaders and our chamber people and who are all awesome. However, we're probably not the first people see when they come to our town. Mm-hmm. So the first people see, the face of our community, are servers at our big restaurant or at the buffet or like the person checking you out at our Walmart or something.
Yeah.
And so like, what if there was like a Sikeston, Missouri, I love this town type of training program that someone in our town put on for our retail workers. And that, like it or not, that this is political, I know, but that may involve quality of life requirements for the participating businesses to provide their employees, because we want them to be happy to be here and to have that position and not just doing this until they can get out of here and go do something else, but to be like, no, I love being a hostess at this restaurant because this is the coolest restaurant run by the coolest entrepreneur. All the chefs in the kitchen are amazing. I love this town. And let me tell you everything else. Okay, after you get up tomorrow, you got to go here to get your coffee. You got to eat at this place. Yep. You got to check out this store. I mean, that would be awesome. And it may require some type of training program up front to, like, we pitched the idea that let's get our largest retail and food employers in town to commit to sending all their employees through our training program called like the Face of Sikeston or something like that. Yeah. And to realize that some of us who are the most energetic and have all the ideas and stuff are probably not, we're probably not being seen by that many people face to face. We're not meeting every single person who stays at the hotels and all that stuff.
Well,
people who are need to be putting our message out there.
It's like growing cultural ambassadors.
Mm-hmm.
For the community. I think that's a brilliant idea. We've talked about that on a smaller scale, but that's something that, again, and I think you talk about it too in your book, that it's so easy to get complacent as a small town, small business owner, especially if you have no competition in your particular zone. If you're the only coffee shop in town and you decide to coast for a little bit, you can kind of do that. It's easy to do that. And so constantly pushing the envelope that, no, we're going to be the best because that's the only way to be.
Mm-hmm.
Not because we have to or we'll lose business. It's because it's the right. So it's true customer service.
Yeah.
And having that be embedded in the culture of everybody that works, that would be a major, like a passion project for me, because I just care so much about that. When I'm disappointed by the service I receive in my own hometown, it's just like heartbreaking to me and frustrating, like I just want to clench my fists and say, like, we can be better than this. Because like you said, I want to say your owner would die if they knew that you were talking to me like this, and it's not like it happens all the time, but it should be. In a small town, we honestly can't afford for it to ever happen.
Yeah.
Because we may not get another shot at leaving an impression on the person standing in front of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, okay. So many good ideas, so many great thoughts. I can't wait to hear what people think about this, because I just think there are people like you doing really meaningful work, and you're doing it through a business that you're running day in and day out. So I appreciate your book so much. Let's just wrap it up with this. What's next for you? So you've just sold, well, not just, when did you actually end up selling off the wholesale?
September of last year, 2018, we sold the roaster and the wholesale part of our business to another coffee shop about 40 miles away.
Okay. So let's talk about that a little bit. Was it hard to let go of? Were you?
It seems like it should have been.
Yeah, but it wasn't.
Everybody asks me, like, wasn't that difficult or whatever? And I have to stop and wonder about myself. I think, like, and this may be unique to me, but it seems like it's in that same part of my head where the entrepreneur stuff is that, like, I just am not sentimental about things. Like, I just see opportunity. And so, like, if I have this amazing espresso machine in my shop that has this whole pedigree of people who've worked on it, and it's got this great history in our region.
Yeah.
But if somebody walked in right now and offered me a lot of money for it, I would sell it. Like, that seems like that amount of, like, I could change that into opportunity for other machines, maybe a second machine that travels, and I could go to farmers markets or whatever. So it seems like that's just all in that opportunity zone for me.
Can I just quick say that is a really huge advantage to you? I personally think, because I think that also means that you're not as apt to hold on to ideas that have outlived their usefulness, like just in community too, right? Because I think that actually hits to the heart of what a lot of the struggle is sometimes in shifting mindsets and culture in a small town, is we get very sentimental about what's happened, like, and what things exist, the events that we run every year, and that, oh my gosh, heaven forbid you change a parade route, or those kinds of things, right? Those are the things people get very attached to them. So I think this is a huge benefit to you as an individual business owner, that you're just like, nah, I'm good. Like, this is an opportunity for me. It's an opportunity for you. And now there's mental space and energy that's cleared up or freed up for you to turn your time and attention to something else. I think that's great. Okay. So you sold the roasting machine. You're like good with it. You're fine. What's next for you in not just Sikeston, but Parengo Coffee too?
Yeah. Well, as part of our deal with the new roaster and our partners, they have a shop called The Groundabout, and they have licensed the brand to fulfill roasting contracts and everything else for the next year or year and a half or so. So they also roast as Parengo Coffee and still fulfill all of our customer agreements and things like that. Parengo Coffee is still, like, the cafe is still a big part of historic downtown Sikeston, and we are working on now kind of like figuring out this growing neighborhood who's added quite a few businesses and events and apartments in the last couple of years, where we fit into that changing landscape. So we're working on adding a courtyard in the back.
Cool.
We've thrown around the idea over and over again. We have a really weird liquor law in our town, so we're trying to figure out what that is and what the requirements are, but we may add a brunch or evening menu that really incorporates the courtyard and outside living, and I've been working on the big alley project to bring art to this really old beat up alley that needs a lot of love. And so we're working on creating a one block walk between a lot of our major municipal buildings like this, like City Hall, and a lot of businesses where apartments are going in upstairs, and the alley between them would be this really awesome muraled, sculptured, lit up walk where our business would open not only to our front street, but also back to this art alley.
Cool.
That's all in the works. And so I think that's gonna fit us in really well. Between one of our major neighborhood events people look forward to every year is directly behind us, behind that alley. Another one is directly in front of us in a park. And we're going to be this great pass through between these types of events that are going to end up happening all year. So just continuing to grow those things. I'm a little bit more on the road these days. I get the opportunity to speak about my book and to talk about downtown stuff.
Yep.
I'm going to be at the Missouri Main Street Connections meeting in St. Louis at the end of July with 3 other area entrepreneurs who are like way better at all this stuff than I am. And we get to sit on a panel together and tell economic development people what we want from them, which is going to be really fun. And then, we may have some more events and books and other things like that in our future pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, it was a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Keep telling the story of entrepreneurship in small towns, because we are listening, and if we're not listening, we need to start listening. So please just keep telling your story. It was a pleasure to have you on, Colby.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.